All things had been achieved thus far. Tamaran was brought before the divine host of Lassashar, and each of them had imbued him with their marks, thereby showing their trust in his capacity to speak for them, all that is, apart from Chrylsis and Malerna. Chrylsis had approved all to do so, but held his own back. He had his reasons for this, as he said he would soon no longer be part of the hosts. This announcement had shook the others, but he took great pains to explain the reasons for him not doing so. Tamaran was to be marked with the touch of the divine by all hosts who held sway upon that prime. He had no such representatives there, and in fact, since the obliteration of several primes, had lost those who had once worshipped him purely. No, he was not present upon this prime, and therefore could not be a part of what was needed, but would also be present only for a short time more. This confused them, and he sat the host down and explained it to them. The loss of something known as the astral. It had once flown around all planes, separating all primes from all other planes, and acting as a demonic barrier that was impenetrable. Many primes had elevated to magic beyond what was seen anywhere in these times, and in some cases, some mortals had become powerful enough to rise to a level of power that was akin to godhood themselves, without divine intervention. These golden ages were now long gone, before all but a handful of their kind had been created by his hand, before the time of the creation of the Nameless. They were slowly drained by the vast demonic incursions of times past, the power being stripped from those primes, as he had used much of this power to create the other hosts, and whenever such happened, the astral had become weakened for a time, allowing such incursions to be possible. Even now, the astral existed, but was so weak it formed nothing more than a skin along the fringes of reality, acting as a barrier to nothing, but was used as a warning bell for chrylsis as to when incursions were taking place. And then he told the host something they had never known. Chrylsis was known as the god of magic. He had no husk, and was not a host. He just was. They had never questioned this fact. He then told them that his power came from all of them, his children, and this they knew. His husk, if it could be called that, was in fact the astral plane itself. This was something that many of them could not grasp or fathom how, but it was the truth. And in order to protect the primes, I must once again become the astral, he announced, putting a stop to their discussions. And I will create and leave a husk here as a vessel for my words and communing with myself should you find the need. The astral is needed, as it is the only way I can see to accomplish several things which must be done. Firstly, the primes need to have enough magic to protect them from further incursions. In bringing the astral back, I will be opening the way for the grand magic of the realms once more. Secondly, this will elevate the magical background levels on all of the primes, and they will continue to increase as long as the astral is instated. This will allow the return of many dormant creatures, as well as the return of some whom are waiting in pocket planes where the magic is high enough for them to live. So perhaps we shall see more of the old ones returning, other than the few primes on which they currently exist in their old and weakened forms. And finally, thirdly, and possibly most importantly, I will be bolstering the barriers between the primes and the planes once more. This will prevent all but the most powerful of daemons from being able to attack the primes directly, and also reduce the amount of power that they and the Nameless One can use when they do reach a prime. I will in effect choke the power they try to push through, lessening their prowess upon arrival. The host remained stunned for a while at his words, but slowly realized what this meant. A new hope for the primes, a new age for the primes, and the planes, and a perfect chance for their followers to flourish and prepare to combat the threats that were coming. A resounding throng of cheers were heard among the hosts for their creator, and he smiled, and then announced his other plan. Also, there is to be a new host to be added to you all. He will be known as Zoranor, and he will be acting as a new supreme power for you all in my absence." Some of the hosts looked concerned, and he assured them quickly, "He is not a replacement for me, nor an over-god, but one who will sit both beneath and above. All power you receive from the realms will first flow into him and then back to you all, and all power from you will flow from you to my husk and then to myself in the astral." "But why?" the voice asked, most definitely concerned by this. "It is so, should any magic invade your followers and try to gain access to you as hosts, it may not do so, as Zoranor will filter it, remove it, and throw it into the void. There will be no more taking of our kind in our sanctum, nor corruption of our kind by daemons." "So does this mean," the host turned to look at a member of the Pantheon of Dominia, "that they will no longer be gods?" He laughed and smiled. "No, assuredly no. They will remain as gods, as will you all, and all those of demonic nature. Once elevated, they are divine, and the demonic natures will now be severed by Zoranor upon becoming such. However, should they be cast down, they will return to their original natures. So a daemon would again become a daemon, a mortal, and so on. And of course, a created host, not an ascended one, casting down, will become an immortal upon the prime they choose to reside upon, by all means other than by direct divine power." "You mean they cannot be killed unless a god kills them?" "That, or one who has been cast down and has such a power to do so, yes. But do not worry, for once Zoranor is in place, you will no longer be able to manifest below directly. You must craft your avatars once more, and this is likely not to happen for millennia, as the magic levels are too low on nearly all primes, so they will be safe enough, I am sure." One of the hosts smiled and added, "So they are safe as long as Aziz remains here among our number." The host laughed, all but a few, and chrylsis took note of all. It took many meetings and long talks to convince the hosts, but it was happening anyway, for it had to, for the preservation of all they knew. Zoranor was created shortly afterward, and introduced to them. He was greeted with a warm reception, but seemed distant and cold. It was his nature, and they all understood he must be this way to achieve his purpose. And so Zoranor was placed among the hosts, and began his service to them all, taking their power, passing it where it was to be channeled, and taking the power of chrylsis and distributing it to them. In effect, Zoranor was truly the most powerful of all of them, as all power flowed through his form, and yet he was not known to those of the primes, or anyone other than the hosts and a select few such as Thalasiac. As if he had followers, as he was ascended himself, it could throw the purpose of his being into disarray. He could not, for example, filter for himself, and so it was decreed he would have no followers of his own. Zoranor did not mind this. In fact, he did not wish for such things, as he was focused single-mindedly on his task, and they all benefited from this new purity of power. And then, once this was in place, and all was seen to be working well, chrylsis stepped down from his place on high as overlord of them all, and cast his essence into the astral, letting his power flow through it, strengthening it, flooding it with power. The power of the host flowed through his host husk, and into him, within the astral, and then from him to wherever he deemed it should go. He ensured the first thing he did was to bring forth the barriers around the primes, just in time it seemed, as an incursion had just begun upon one, and this act shrank the pathway to that prime, stemming the flow of demonic power as it trickled through. They were able to cope with the incursion, and eventually close that rift. Next, he expanded the flow to encompass the elemental planes. They were the closest to the primes, and they were the stepping stones to an easy pathway to them. They became encapsulated, only allowing links to other elemental planes and primes, and cutting them off entirely wherever possible from demonic planes. Any that could not be cut off in this manner gained the protection of the barriers he had used upon the primes, meaning they could fight back more readily against the incursions that threatened to steal away their power. It was all going well, and then, once these steps had been enacted, he began the final stages, and first allowed magic from the astral to leak into the primes, the barrier skin that touched the primes radiating pure magic, energizing the old magical lines that ran crisscross around the primes. These were known by many as force lines, and they were the basis for the great magic that had been lost to the realms in ages past. For one upon the prime could enhance their own prowess by tapping into these conduits of raw power, and if they could harness such, enact amazing spells. The side effect of this was that although these force lines were now active, the flow was constant, and the force lines were almost never perfectly as they used to be. In short, they leaked. Just a little. Some more so than others. And this began to leak into the primes where such were located, and slowly began to raise the background magic levels. This would allow the awakening of the old races and creatures of the primes in time. Finally, he set about releasing the astral entities that had been locked away in pocket planar stasis. These creatures resided purely within the astral and could not exist without it. He had used a vast amount of his power when the astral had been pulled away, in order to create these pocket realms, purely to prevent the death of these entities. He had saved them, and they were now his agents within their new realm. As vast as it was, he could not see everything at once, even with his power. They were agreeable with their salvation, and gladly agreed to aid him in keeping their newly established realm safe. Overall, it had been a long and tiresome run to make this happen. He had been planning since the astral had been removed the first time, and now his plans had finally come to fruition. And with Zoranor in place, he could reside as the essence of magic once more. And so, chrylsis entered his slumber. Malerna waited, and as the astral became established again, she tested her powers, and found them indeed stronger again, and revelled in this newfound increase. Oh, the fun she had tormenting the minds of lesser creatures, terrorizing mages with madness and so on. However, she also waited for the lines of force to build up to a good strength, and then summoned forth her child, the abomination. She located a line of force, a thin one of low magic, and directed her child to test its strength on it, and was elated with the results. As the abomination opened its great eye, the raw magic from the line redirected from the direction along the line, straight into its eye. It continued to draw this line until it was but a single hairbreadth in size, whereupon she commanded it stop, and it turned away, closing its eye, the flow slowly beginning to strengthen as the drain was removed, and she knew now what she was capable of with her child. She could remove magic from her realm entirely, should she choose to. Mayhem was now indeed hers, should she wish it, and she would of course need to feed her child from time to time, and now, with the astral back, she would ensure it grew up big and strong.